of Accelerate You, where we hope to provide small business owners and entrepreneurs with low cost and often free resources in the area to accelerate you and your business. I'm Dr. Gina Messer-Node with the North Carolina Wesleyan Center of Business and Entrepreneurship, and I'm so excited about our guest today. Today we have Mr. Fred George. Now, for those of you in Eastern North Carolina, he's not a stranger. You come on WHIG quite often and talk to us about a number of business-related issues. But for that one viewer out there today who doesn't know who you are, will you please take a minute and tell our audience who you are and what you do?
Sure thing. My name is Fred George. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been founding and operating and making my living off my own businesses since I was in my early 20s, and I'm in my late 50s now, so it's been a while. The businesses you might have heard of if you are from the area, Trade It is mine. I founded that one 18, 19 years ago in Fayetteville, and we had up to 13 stores at one point. We have 4 now. We've streamlined that quite a bit. I've got the Small Shops Mall, which is a incubator project to help folks get into retail as entrepreneurs in a way that's going to be safe and not have a lot of the pitfalls that opening a store in a freestanding or a shopping center building is going to give you. We have a solar company based in Wendell, Solar Grids of Wendell, where we can do residential solar. I've got a little sales team up there that goes out and talks to people. And then I do some business counseling where I try to give back to the community a little bit by taking particularly people who want to open micro businesses but don't have the family background. I don't have a degree. I've never graduated from a formal institution as far as business, but I've got what I call a kitchen table MBA, where my dad's a businessman and his dad's a businessman, and my mom was a businesswoman, and so I learned a lot around the kitchen table, just listening to them talk about the challenges and the problems and solutions and working in the family businesses. And passing that information on to other people is something I find really rewarding.
Well, you're not giving yourself enough credit. You are routinely a facilitator for us, for the college, for the community colleges, with our Ice House program and our entrepreneurial boot camps that we run periodically in downtown Rocky Mount. So although you may not have a formal degree, you certainly are credentialed. And we appreciate having you as part of our team. Now, you've talked about many things, which I think you already said. I am a serial entrepreneur, and you truly are. Solar panels, Trade It, small shops. So let's talk about Trade It first.
All right.
What is Trade It?
Trade It, we'll give you the short version of the history of Trade It. In the early 1980s, about 1985, I guess, so mid-1980s, I was in Virginia Beach. I loved video games because I was in that age group. Of course, the games weren't like they are nowadays. There weren't any real graphics. But I loved video games, and I loved buying them used. But you couldn't do it locally. There were 2 mail order firms, this is prior to the internet, where you could send off and they print catalogs, you could order a game, and 3 weeks later you get your game. And I thought, you know, it'd be really cool to have a store right here in Virginia Beach that would do that. So I opened what was, and this sounds like a made-up story, but I opened what was the first used video game store in a mall in America. In Lynn Haven Mall in Virginia Beach, we did games and CDs. CDs were being sold used everywhere at the time. But we called the place Recycled Games and Music, later changed it to Play More Games. But I grew from one store, little kiosk in the mall, to a dozen through Virginia and up into Maryland over about a 3-year period. Then the national chain started selling used games. At the time it wasn't GameStop, there was EB Games and Babbage's Software, et cetera, and another shopping center-based company called Funco Land. They started selling used games. And so I'd grown to 13 or 12 or 13 stores really quickly, and then they started selling used games, and I shrank back down to 1 relatively quickly as well, because I couldn't really compete, because they could do store credit for new games, and I couldn't get new games cheaply enough. So I held on to the 1 store way too long, because I was dumb enough. Never, ever, as a business person, you can't ever become emotionally invested in that business being a reflection of you, because then you do what I did, which is you hang on to a business long after there's no money to be made. So I hung on to my last location in Pembroke Mall in Virginia Beach until I went broke. Ended up at the age of 38 with no car, no job, no business. Still had a little condo in Norfolk, but I couldn't afford to live there. I had to rent it out. Moved into my parents' guest bedroom. I was looking for another business opportunity. I bumped into a company called This is a longer answer than you were expecting. Bumped into a company called Cash Converters, which did buy, sell, trade on everything. It's an Australian franchise. And I went there week in and week out. I got a little sales job to be able to make money temporarily. I was trying to figure out their system, but it was too complicated. There were too many moving parts. So they're buying everything from lawn mowers to video game systems to TVs to video cameras. I couldn't figure it out. So I put together my first and only resume and knocked on the door of the home office and said, hey, you're opening a new store, you need a manager, I'll be your manager. And they interviewed me and beat around the bush for 45 minutes, these Australians. And I finally said, look, I know the question you're trying to ask me, why do I want to work for you? What if only ever worked for me? And the answer is I don't really, no interest in it. But I need to learn your system, and it's gonna take me 2 to 3 years. I'll sign any non-compete you want. I won't open a store within 50 miles or 100 miles or whatever you decide, and I'll make you a lot of money for a couple of years. And they were so desperate, they took me up on it. And the rest of the story there is I worked there, made it the #1 store in North America. There were only about 25 stores in North America at the time. Less now, they've gone out of business for the most part now. But made a lot of money for them, and then got some investors together and bought a failing Cash Converter store in Fayetteville. Cash Converters is almost the exact same concept as Traded. I made a couple of tweaks, I would say improvements. We're still in business and they're not, so I guess we can say improvements. But that's how I got involved in Traded. And the idea is Tradeds are supposed to be a clean, comfortable place that a family can go into, sell their used stuff without the stigma or anything unsavory. It should be a professional business environment. You can sell your old video games, your old TV, your old tools, whatever, and get a fair cash offer. Gold is a big one right now because
Sure.
it's going up. And then you can also purchase items that are used with a warranty that are clean and tested, and that if something does get past us, and stuff sometimes gets past us, you can't test everything, that we're going to give you a refund. And that's been a real good business for me. It's let me raise my kids and keep the cars running and have a house to live in and all that. So,
Which is all good. Now, you don't just have the one here in Rocky Mount. I know you have one in Goldsboro.
that's right.
Fayetteville still,
Oh yeah.
and
And Greenville.
Greenville.
Those
Okay.
are the 4 we have right now. And I would open another one in Wilson tomorrow if I could find a good manager.
Hear
Employees
that,
have gotten
folks?
so hard.
He's looking for a good manager in Wilson. So contact us in a little bit here. So let's just recap the model really simple. Is there anything you don't trade?
Yes. The main thing we don't trade is firearms.
Okay.
Not that we're against the Second Amendment or firearms, just the paperwork and organizational skills and extra security you have to have if you're going to have. I can have $200,000 worth of electronics in my Greenville store, and I don't worry much about anybody breaking in. We've got an alarm system, it's fine. If you have $100,000 worth of firearms in your business, you attract a more determined class of criminal. And the paperwork for the BATF is also quite complex. So we're not against the Second Amendment or gun ownership. It's not a business we're in, though.
Just not your business. Okay, very good. So if I'm out there listening and I'm an entrepreneur or I'm just looking to generate some revenue, Trade It is definitely a place I want to come and bring my stuff and see what kind of deal we can make.
Absolutely, and we should generally pay better than the pawnbrokers do. I'm not going to say every single time because you never know.
True.
But generally we can pay better than a pawnbroker. We can't make loans, which is a great thing. If you have something and you want to make some money on it quickly, and you don't mind paying 20% interest to keep that money for a month, pawn shops are great. It's just not a business we're in. If you sell it to us, it's ours. So we've purchased it. We'll pay a little more than you would have gotten on a loan in most cases, but then we're going to resell it.
And I make that transaction today, you take my stuff, you give me the money, and I walk out?
Absolutely.
Okay, but
Absolutely.
that couldn't be any easier then.
Yeah, and we'd love everybody to come by anything you've got you're not using. If you're obtaining your things in an illegal or immoral way, we're not the right place to go.
Okay.
We report everything through Leads Online, which is a national clearinghouse for law enforcement. So if people, and they do sometimes, if people are coming to sell us stolen goods, the Rocky Mount Police Department can find that in about 2 seconds. They get a download or an upload every day. And so we're probably not the best place for that. But otherwise, Yeah.
But going back to your comments about you try to be clean, you're family oriented, it sounds like that's part of your brand.
Oh, yeah.
So that you definitely are tracking the merchandise per se, so that if it is stolen, we get it right back to the right owner.
Yes.
So that's wonderful. That's wonderful to know. So there you go. A little bit more about the Trade It shops, and please visit one of the 4. Now, what I really know you from is small shops. I think you were one of the very first people I met when I came here to Rocky Mount, and I met you at small shops.
I remember
and
that
it
well.
wasn't open yet. You had just acquired that spot on Sunset, and now it is. How many years later?
3 or 4? I guess maybe 4 now.
Oh, it's longer than that.
Is it?
Yes, it's much
Time
longer
flies,
than
you're having
yes,
fun.
it's every bit of 4. So we transitioned from Trade It to small shops. Tell our viewers about that.
Small shops came into being because being in business for myself my whole life, especially with Trade It for some reason, people would come to me and say, hey Fred, I want to go into retail. How do I do what you do? How do I go into retail? And it's a hard question, because the real answer I should give, if that's the only question, is that you probably shouldn't. The landlord's going to 5-year lease. If you haven't already had some success in retail, the landlord's going to charge you a lot of rent, more than he would charge me. He'll charge me more than he would charge a national chain, but you're going to pay top rates if it's your first time. And he's going to demand a personal guarantee, which means if you have a 5-year lease at $5,000 a month, which is a moderate lease on a decent sized store, that's a $300,000 lease. Once you personally guarantee it and sign that contract that you guarantee that, if your business fails, you still owe that landlord $300,000. So the answer I would normally give would be, well, you got to work hard and save up, but it's not a good answer. The true answer is you probably shouldn't. So what Small Shops Mall is designed to do is take the risk out of it. The reasons businesses fail are employee management, which is hard. Nobody learns in high school or in real life how to hire and train and select and fire employees. Leases, a bad lease will kill you.
Right.
When I signed the lease for the location on Sunset where Small Shops and Trade It are now, I didn't even know what business I was going to put in there. But I got such a good deal on the lease, I just knew I'd make money doing something. Those 2 things, and then inventory levels, because you have to fill a whole big store. At Small Shops Mall, a new entrepreneur can come in. There's no lease. It's a month-to-month deal. So you pay me. We've actually lowered our rent now. It's $1.50 a square foot. Used to be $2. We dropped our rent because the economy got crazy, and we want people to have a way to make money, and we want to keep the store full. So $1.50 a square foot. So $75, $150, depending on the size of the space. I'll say $150 for a space. You pay me that rent for the month. That's all you do. Then you set up your store, display your merchandise, price it, come in once a week to restock. We have employees there 7 days a week to ring up the items, to help customers, to put the items in bag. We take care of the credit cards and all the payment stuff. And then every day, our merchants get an email telling them what's sold from their shop. So if you have a red lamp and you've labeled it red lamp, $16.99, you get an email saying you sold a red lamp, $16.99. So you know what you're selling. And then you don't have any employees. All you have to do is stock your store. So it becomes a very easy way to sort of ease into retail for people. And we've had lots of people who are still with us from the beginning. And of course, there's some people who come in for a while and leave. They move, they grow to someplace different. A lot of reasons to leave. We've had a lot of people with us since the beginning and are making good money. And I'm looking forward to the day when I can get some of them to move out into their own stores. I've got 2 of them right now who are kind of talking about that, and I'd love to help them negotiate a lease to move into a freestanding store and go to the next level.
So, and that is what I think is so brilliant about the small shops, because you're absolutely right. So for our entrepreneurs that are at home and maybe they want to upscale from the home, right? Add a little bit more legitimacy to their whatever it is, product, service, or idea, they can relatively easy transition from the home to small shops, a 30-day commitment, and that's
right.
it. You're going to handle the money, the employees, and then I'm just going to come pick up a check.
Absolutely.
And then it's also, you use the word incubator, which is a great word. I'm going to maybe say a test market. This gives you the opportunity for very little money to test your idea. Is there the market out there? before you sign that 5-year lease. And you're absolutely correct. And yeah, I mean, pre-pandemic rental rates were easily $3,000 to $5,000 for a kind of a small size spot in a strip mall. So I have no idea what they are today, but you're right. And there's a plethora of different leases that people can get involved in. And I don't think they realize this. You could actually sign that lease and make that $300,000 commitment and then be responsible for the maintenance of your spot.
And the maintenance of the entire property. A lot of them have fees you pay for the lawn mowing and the painting and the repaving, and those fees are, they call them CAM fees, common area maintenance. Those fees, they can raise them however they want. You don't have any recourse.
Well, and I used to be in that situation where I was responsible for the outside, and it wasn't so much the cost, it was trying to find someone to do it, right? Because what looks worse when somebody pulls up to your spot at night and either the lights aren't on or the grass is a foot high, right?
Horrible.
So and that spot was probably about $250,000 a year. Oof. So you'd think they'd throw in lawn care, right? But no, I took care of that as well. So I don't think new entrepreneurs, as you talk about, are really aware of the pitfalls that they can find themselves in when they decide, hey, I've got this great idea, I'm going to take my cupcakes over here.
Yeah, the pitfalls and the fact that not every landlord will do this, but lots of them, especially the big nationals, and they became big for a reason. If they see that you're inexperienced, they will give you a lease at 20% higher than they would have given it to me. They will negotiate less, and they'll have clauses in their leases that nobody should sign. The leases are designed with several little traps in them. If your lawyer's not good enough to check them and eliminate them, you lose. And new entrepreneurs often don't even read the lease, they just sign it. Or they read it themselves and don't get it to an attorney. And some of those leases have disastrous clauses in them. Mm-hmm. I signed one early in my career that had a 20% late fee if you were a day late on the rent. With a good rent figure, that's a big late fee.
Right.
I'm not generally late on rent, but I was late once with that one, and I was like, holy cow, you an extra $2,000? Because things were very tight. It was my first store, it was very tight. But yeah, no, avoiding the lease, avoiding the employees, hiring and training employees is tough, and then all the little stuff. You know, you need an HVAC maintenance contract for your air conditioning. You need somebody who can repair automatic doors if you have those. You need a good credit card company with good processing rates who will send you to a machine when the old one goes bad. And the cash registers and the training. We just eliminate all that and make it very easy for somebody to see if their business concept works in the simplest possible way. And then if it does, hopefully they stay and keep making money or even grow bigger.
Right. And yes, and it is a wonderful, wonderful business model. And you kind of grew up in that model. If I remember correctly, maybe not the small shops model, but your family were antique dealers, vendors up and down the East Coast. So yeah. You kind of grew up around this structure.
Absolutely. My dad was more of a restaurateur and wholesaler, but my cousin Johnny did very similar concepts to this as a vendor, and my dad has as well. And then opened up about 15 of them in Kentucky that he's got called Peddler's Mall, which is a very similar concept, although he goes with much bigger locations in bigger cities. He goes with former Kmart's is what he's mostly in. So 200,000 square foot, just monstrosities. We're a little smaller because this town maybe isn't big enough for a full-size Kmart full of vendor booths yet.
Well, and let's remind our audience, you're in the old Steinmart building on Sunset. You're there with the roses, and Traded is right next door, and Harris Teeter is just right down the street. So if you don't know where he's located, it's right in that general area. So definitely, even if you're not an entrepreneur, you really need to stop by sometimes to see what's in there, right? Because I'm sure there's something you can't live without. So you need to go check out small shops. So the leases, your work as an instructor, your work as a consultant, tell us about that. Tell us about some of the things that you've learned, not just in your experience, but when you facilitate the classes that new entrepreneurs. You mentioned I've written a resume once. And it sounds like you almost threatened somebody to get hired. I don't know. You told those Australians, you better hire me. I'm not necessarily going with that. So tell us some other Fredisms that we can pass on to our entrepreneurs.
Well, I love working with new entrepreneurs. It's just real rewarding to see people who have everything except for the knowledge. And if you grew up with the family knowledge of how to do something, you know how to do it. My dad never worked on cars, so I can't change the oil very easily. I'm no good at that at all. My dad did open businesses, one after the other. I know how to do that. Folks who grew up without that family knowledge, it's so, I love teaching them the basics, the stuff that I learned by osmosis. And a lot of that's just, focus, as you know, is huge. The sun has the power of like 100,000 nuclear bombs every second hitting the earth. You can stand out there with all that radiation and, shirtless, and you're okay. A laser powered by a simple outlet on a wall can cut right through flesh and bone because it's focused. Focusing on something. Too many new entrepreneurs want to do everything. You got to do one thing. You got to be the best at something. Just one thing. Lease negotiations. I love lease negotiations. I negotiate leases for free, just for fun. I love that stuff. I love sitting down with a real hard-nosed landlord and working with him and fighting against him to try to get a good lease. That's entertainment. I love that. Funding. People, everybody, not everybody, many people I talk to are like, if I could only get $10,000 or $100,000, I could start this great business. Getting the funding and finding the funding is how you earn your right to be in the game. The same way if you have a caterpillar trying to get out of its little cocoon and you just open the cocoon, the caterpillar will die. Fighting to get out of the cocoon is how it builds up the strength. You've got to get the funding, and there's simple ways to do it. Not easy, but simple. And if you can't get the funding, you're not ready yet. That's just the truth. That takes a lot, and you prove a lot to your investors, but mostly to yourself. And once you've put that much work and sweat into it, you're invested in it. If you just got the money easy, I think you would just go. Those are some of my main areas. I love my entrepreneurial boot camp. That's a lot of fun because I can spend a week on each of several topics.
And for the folks out there going, well, what is this? I want to know more. Just follow the Eastern North Carolina Center for Business and Entrepreneurship or Nash Community College's Small Business Center, because we run those together. We run those a couple of times a year, and they are free, and they meet at night. I think we shake up the nights. Sometimes it's Tuesday night, some nights it's other nights, but it runs for about 8 to 10 weeks. We have a Shark Tank at the end. People have the opportunity to sometimes win money, sometimes win a free month's rent somewhere. So it's definitely something. We do write a formal business plan in the class, but there's a lot of other topics we go over as well. You mentioned something, and you talked about focus, and you talked about funding, and being I'm going to use the word pit bull and going after it to kind of prove you're worthy of being in the fight. But you also mentioned, I was very successful. I did not know when to sell it off. I won't say you went bankrupt, but you moved back home with the parents as an adult. Let's talk to that. Not all entrepreneurs are successful. Some are successful and then maybe not, but that doesn't mean you should give up the fight, right? I mean, you jumped right back in. That's hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 things I learned through this. The first one is, if you're successful at something, at least me, it's easy to conflate the two. I am the business. Because I founded it. Play More Games was my business. I invented the idea. Everybody told me it was a terrible idea. Nowadays, a used video game store sounds like a no-brainer. At the time, it was considered stupid. When the mall leased me the space, I said, hey, I want this spot, but I need to make sure I can stay here for all year round once I open. And the mall manager said, yeah, I'll promise you that. You can stay here. If you were successful, you could stay. 4 months later, he comes, he says, Fred, we got to move you, because the Virginia Beach gift shop is coming in that spot. I said, John, you told me I could stay year round. He says, yeah, about that. When you came to me with this idea, I thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard. I talked to everybody else in the mall management office here at Lynn Haven Mall, the biggest mall in Virginia Beach. They all laughed. I called the corporate offices of Simon Properties, which is the biggest mall company in America. They all said it was a stupid idea, but take your rent money. We all knew you wouldn't be here any more than 2 months, so I figured I promised you could stay year round because it wouldn't matter. That's how dumb an idea was considered at the time. So because I invented the idea and I thought I was so smart, I was so invested in that and that idea being me, I couldn't let them fail. I became emotionally attached to the business. The first thing is, don't be emotionally attached to your business or even what your concept of the business is. You might want to open a location or a business selling 3 items and you think item 1's going to be your best one. After 3 months of the business, you may find that item 3 is the one you're selling. You've got to change the business. You can't be emotionally invested to selling just this. I had just a quick story. When I was in retail in Virginia Beach, I had a buddy, Wendell Parker was his name. He had a company called Zap Electronics. You may not have ever heard of Zap Electronics. They were at one time the largest seller of pagers on the East Coast. He had stores all the way from Delaware or Pennsylvania all the way down to Florida in malls. All kind of pagers. And I asked him, Wendell, how did you start? He said, it's a funny story. Me and my partner started by opening a little jewelry kiosk in McCrory's inside of Military Circle, which is a third-rate mall in Norfolk. And they were selling jewelry and they got killed. They were selling plated jewelry, they couldn't sell it. They were just losing their shirts. A kid came and said, hey, can I put a few pagers here on consignment? And they said, yeah, we got empty space, go ahead. They sold out of his pagers in 2 days. Called him back, he came and put 50 pagers in. They sold out of those in about another week. He came in, refilled again with like 150. Then the police showed up because they were all stolen pagers and they confiscated them all. But Wendell immediately changed his business from a junk jewelry business to a pager business. He was able to grow it over 10 years into the biggest pager company on the East Coast. Don't get attached. If he'd gotten attached to being a jewelry salesman, he couldn't have done that. So you've got to be able to change your vision, and sometimes you've got to just write something off. Take that idea, as Kevin on Shark Tank says, take that idea behind the barn and shoot it.
Well, you're absolutely correct. Don't be overly emotional about the business or the products. And if the market shows you that the pager is where they want to spend their money, then that's the problem you try to solve, and don't worry about the gold-plated jewelry. Well, folks, we've given you low-cost opportunities with small shops. I can move in for $1.50 a square foot.
Yes, ma'am.
30-day, no other commitment. If I've got stuff at the house I need to get rid of so I can start my business, which most entrepreneurs do. They start their own business with their own cash at hand. I can go to Trade It. If I want to do some one-on-one coaching and counseling, I can contact you. Now, tell our audience quickly, how do we reach you, Fred?
Best way to reach me is either stop by small shops, they can always get a hold of me, or you can just text me. I don't answer phone calls much, but you can text me at 252-373-6912. My phone's always here in my pocket. I always respond to texts.
Very good. And and just reach out to WHIG here and they can get a hold of either one of us. So, well, Fred, thank you so much for coming in today. I'm so excited about everything. I'm a big fan of small shops, a big fan of Trade It. So we're just so lucky to have you here, and I live in Goldsboro, so we've got the big Trade It store there.
Oh, yeah.
So nice to have that there. So wonderful, wonderful. So folks, have a wonderful week, and we will see you next week.
Thank you, Gina.
You're welcome.